Hey guys, today we're going to be doing a IS300 ECUMaster Black plug and play using a 1JZ GTE Non VVT-i. So let's get into it. Right, as I said, this is a harness built to use an ECUMaster Black that is plug and play into an IS300. The customer is using a 1JZ GTE Non VVT-i with an R154 gearbox. So that's the whole setup inside the vehicle that it's going to go into. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the layout of the harness so the customer can see everything. We're going to explain all of the sub harnesses as we go along. And then what we'll do is we'll run into the actual testing of the harness. So one with just the ignition on like we normally do, testing all the outputs, etc. And then we'll do a test with the engine actually running. And obviously this will change when it goes to the running test. So first thing we're going to do though, let's take a look at what goes into building one of these harnesses. So we'll look at a couple of build photos now. And at the end, you'll see one with all the complete photos there. All right, see you in a second. Right, so now you've seen exactly what went into making this particular harness. So, as I said, let's go through the layout of the harness, where everything goes. Let's explain all these sub harnesses to you guys and the customer, and then we'll go on to the testing part. So, starting here at the ECU end, it's a little bit messy, I know, but obviously I'm converting my IS200 shell to an IS300. So I have an interface to an interface, and then an interface to the interface, which is down in the bottom over there. So that's why it looks a little bit messy, but obviously that's not what it would look like inside the vehicle. Again, at the end of the video, I've actually got photos of what it looks like complete with everything in the ECU box. Nice. Okay, so let's start with the ECU. So the ECU, you've got two connectors. Really nice and simple. There's a USB cable that pushes in there and actually stays in the ECU now. So that was a thing in the past where I think some people were having problems with the USB breaking. So again, there's cable in there. It actually stays in the ECU. You don't take it out, and then you just plug in your USB cable that is provided with the ECU over there. Okay, first thing to come out the ECU, we've created two extra plugs for things that the customer is not currently using but might want to do in the future. So the first one is communication. So this is a 6-pin plug. We've got CAN high, CAN low. We've got the RS232, both transmit and receive. And we've got a 12 volt and we've got a ground. So again, you can run any sort of CAN device from here to also provide the power and the ground for the customer if he wishes to do so. Okay, on the ECU also there is a map sensor built in. So you can see that little nipple down there on the ECU there. So that's where he'll be connecting his vacuum for his engine on there. And then the next one is the pedal. Now you're probably a bit confused. Obviously a non-VVT-i doesn't have drive-by-wire, but we don't want to limit you guys. So we have actually built in the ability to run this with a drive-by-wire throttle from standard. So he can upgrade to a Bosch throttle if you wanted to further down the line. We can just make him another sub harness for his throttle and that would work. And if we did that, obviously we'd need to have an accelerator pedal input, so we can make one that goes from here out the bottom of the ECU box and then inside the vehicle to an electronic pedal. So we've basically built everything in so he can upgrade as he likes, as he goes along with his vehicle. Okay, so that's that section over there. Then we have the interface with the IS300. So that's your two IS300 body plugs that will remain behind in the vehicle when you remove the IS300 2JZ GE VVT-i engine. Then we have the three body plugs. So we've got this white one over here, that one over there, which will go into a gray one in the IS300 like the IS200, and then we've got the blue one that goes over there as well. Okay, again, all unique, so you can't get them wrong. And I said, if you look at the photos at the very end, you'll see when it's all plugged in how nice it looks. Okay. Right, so that's the plugs that are being over there. Then we do have our device to obviously translate MPX from analog signals to the dash. So we'll go through that as part of the testing. We'll show you what works on the dash, and we'll explain what doesn't, because I think it's just low oil level won't work, and the ambient temperature just displays a constant 18 degrees. That's it, basically. But everything else, the fuel level, the oil light, the battery light will come on when the voltage drops low, but the oil light and everything will work 100% on that particular setup. Okay, so that's inside the ECU box. Obviously, then you have your grommet, which slides into this U channel over there, and the harness will make its way to the back of the engine. Obviously, I've got it resting on top because my engine's not an ideal position to have everything put into place. Okay, but the harness will run along here. And at the back here, we're going to break out into three sections. And again, because it's a brand new harness, everything is labeled for you guys. So this one is for the injectors. So you see that's plugged in over there and goes to all the injectors over there. So the customer's using the standard injectors in this particular case. So those will go directly in. Obviously, he can later on, if he wants to change injectors, he can unplug that and then obviously change the plug. Phone us up, we'll make him another sub harness for whatever connector he wants. Next up, we've got ignition. Now, in this case, the customer is running a 1UZ Non VVT-i, so 1JZ Non VVT-i. So he has the 6 individual coil packs. So you see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 over there. Again, it is the dumb coils. But luckily, with the ECUmaster Black, you can run the dumb coils without an igniter. So you see there's no need for an igniter in this harness, even though he's running the dumb coils. So that's absolutely fine. Lastly, coming out the back here is going to be your wideband oxygen sensor. So you can see at the moment I've got it plugged into a wideband, which is going into the exhaust over there. And obviously in this case, I can't remember 100%, but the customer, I think he's asked us to supply him with one, or he may have one already. So that is all ready to go to plug in a Bosch LSU 4.9. Nothing to do there, just plug it straight into the system. Okay. Moving along, and the harness will go around there. So remember, when this is obviously all tucked away inside here, this would actually more be like down here. But anyway, then that is going to go along till there, and we're going to have another breakout over here. And obviously, because it's a Non VVT-i 1JZ, we have our idle control valve, ISC, idle speed control. So that's going to plug into the idle speed control valve that goes over there. Then we have our cam sensor, which plugs into there. Again, everything is labeled for you guys, so you all know pretty straightforward where it goes. And then lastly, we have the ground. So in my case, I'm just bolting it here because remember, this is a 2JZ GE VVT-i engine, not a 2JZ GTE or a 1JZ GTE. You guys obviously have earths on the face of your inlet manifold here, so that's where this is designed to bolt down to, okay? Then the harness is going to run along to there, and it's just sagging down a bit there, but you'll see we've got a massive breakout section over here, so I'm going to have to go down now. I'll try and lift up as best I can. But let's go through all of the sections that break out through here, okay? Just move that out of the way. Right, so you can see they're all pushed down through over here. Now, this thin one I'm holding in my hand there, that is the starter solenoid. So you can see that plugs in just over there, no problemo. Then we have our AC, which is our very, very tiny one there, and that comes through and that plugs in all the way over here. So remember, because it is an IS300, we can actually control the AC through the ECU. I'll go through that as part of the testing. I'll show you exactly how we do that. But yeah, that is your plug for your AC, straight into there. Okay, let's go up next. We've got our gearbox on here. So again, because it's an IS300 plug and play, we have a gearbox harness on here. So this goes off to one for an R154. So we've got the reverse switch and the speed sensor. Now, as you'll know, the IS300 does get its speed from the ABS ECU. So what we have done is we fed the speed signal from there to the actual ECU. When we do the testing in a minute on the laptop, I'll actually show you, we feed a signal to it, you'll see a speed on the ECU itself. So you can just calibrate that. And then get a speed on your ECU. Obviously, inside the vehicle is taken care of by the ABS ECU. All right, but obviously reverse, we're going to test as well, and that also goes inside the vehicle there. So that's your gearbox over there. Next up is your oil. All right, and this customer wanted to keep it simple, so all we've got is just the straightforward oil pressure switch that goes in there. But he is capable of adding an oil pressure sensor as well as an oil temperature sensor in there as well. So again, he can give us a call. We can supply him a sub harness with sensors if he requires, and he can change that over to an oil pressure and temp. Okay. Next up, we're going to go over to our fuel pressure harness. Now, this one is a 4-pin plug, so that means we have the ability to add fuel, not only pressure, but also temperature. Now, there is a caveat with that. I have put that in, but if he is using drive-by-wire, the temperature element will fall away because we're using one of those analog inputs for one of the, either the throttle or the pedal. Because remember, on a drive-by-wire system like these, you need 2 TPS signals and you need 2 pedal signals. So if he doesn't have drive-by-wire, he can have fuel temp. If he does have drive-by-wire, he can have fuel pressure, but then the temp will then fall away. Okay. So that's that, and let's dig in the back over here, and we have our knock sensor sub harness. So in this case, the customer has opted for Bosch wideband knock sensors. So you see it's not a standard Toyota connector on there. Obviously, we are supplying both the nut and stud kit and the knock sensors themselves as well. Next up is our throttle plug. So again, let's get that right. There you go, throttle sub harness over there. Now in this case, because he's still running his standard throttle over there, we just simply have the 4-pin TPS connector that you get on a 1JZ GTE Non VVT-i. And then we provided him with a separate intake air temperature sensor. Now, we are fully aware that there is an intake air temperature sensor on the inlet manifold, but obviously with them being incredibly old, it's a much better option just to go with a brand new sensor over there that he can now fit into his intake tubing right that comes up right over here. No problemo. Okay. Right, so that is pretty much everything that comes down through over here. So again, nice and simple, everything is labeled. Obviously, you can change everything around. You can change gearbox, just got to change the small section. You can change his throttle. We can just create another small little harness over there. He can add a fuel pressure sensor on. He can add an oil pressure sensor on. It doesn't require a brand new harness. It just requires a little tiny harness that you can unclip and clip in your new one over there. Okay, then the harness will carry on along through here. Let's move that out of the way from there. Right, so it's going to carry on along through there, and this is going to end up at this breakout point over here, okay? Now, out here comes the coolant temperature. Now, you'll notice that we don't have a VVT-i plug, obviously because it's a non-VVT-i engine harness, so we don't have a VVT-i, but we do have the coolant plug. Now then, on a 1JZ GT non-VVT-i, both of the coolant temperature sensors are located in the coolant pipe over here, usually like facing forward like that. So this is designed to flip over and actually plug into those coolant temperature sensors over there. Now, in his case, because we need to feed a coolant temperature signal to the ECU, you'll see that I'm using my JZ100 sensor bolted into my 2JZ GE block, and then I'm using the standard coolant temperature sensor. But I have had to make an adaptation because obviously the non-VVT-i has the different style of coolant plug. Okay, so that's the harness he's getting over there. Obviously, we can change it and he can just have a coolant temperature sensor if he doesn't want to, but because IS300, we need a coolant temperature signal for the dash from a separate signal wire sensor, and that comes standard on the 1JZ GE non-VVT-i. Right, and the harness moves along through there, and we have the last breakout over here, and that's where we end up going down to our crank sensor, which is over there, our alternator, which is over there. And again, the customer has inspected on this particular one, but we have put him in allocation to run a Mac boost valve. So at the moment that is blanked off over there, but he can add that on if he does want to. Again, we can supply everything to you guys that you want. So if you want a Mac, we can supply the actual Mac valve with its own separate harness that plugs directly in. Okay, so that is pretty much the entire harness layout. Okay, so hopefully super simple. You can see where everything goes. Hopefully for the others that are watching, you can see what we're trying to do here by making a harness that you don't need to replace every time you want to upgrade something. You can just swap out these sub harnesses whenever you want. Basically turns into Lego. You can build what you want when you want and change what you want when you want. All right, so what I'm going to do now is get everything ready, and then we're going to come back and we're going to be doing the testing, and that's going to be made up of the two parts, one with the engine running. So back in a second. Right guys, so we're back for the testing now, and it's going to be made up of the two sections as per usual, one with the ignition on and one with the engine running. Now, just a heads up, when it comes to these aftermarket ECUs, there is quite a few hours of testing that we get to before we even get to this stage. Obviously, to test every single thing on the camera and doing a video would make the videos incredibly long and boring probably for you guys. So as below, in the description, I've got a link to all of our ECUMaster videos. We have a playlist where I go through a whole bunch of things like testing your inputs, your outputs, how to set up your inputs and outputs, and so on. Obviously, every customer that buys from us, they'll get the ECU with everything already set up for them, all the inputs and outputs as per their specification. But anyway, so I'm not going to bore you with a full load of testing. We're just doing a brief bit of testing just to show you that everything is working as it should do. And we'll do that now. So let's jump into what we're going to be actually testing. So with the ignition on, because it's an IS300 plug and play, we're going to be looking at the ambient temperature. So that's the outside temperature that's on the display there. We'll then check the check engine light and the oil pressure. We're going to look for those on the cluster over there. We're then going to go to these two plugs for the gearbox, test the reverse by bridging that switch over there and wait for the beep. That's why we use the IS200 cluster, because it gives us the beeping noise, so I know that the circuit all going inside the car is correct. And as I said, we've connected the speed sensor to the ECU, so we'll feed a signal to the ECU, and then our vehicle speed should pop up on the laptop over there. Okay. Right, so that's going to be speed. Then next up is going to be fuel pump. So we're going to go back over here. I'm going to test the outputs function, and I'm going to test the fuel pump on there. So you should hear it clicking on and off. When I turn the ignition on, you're probably going to hear the fuel pump working as well. But yeah, I just do an extra test for that. And then lastly, we're going to go through the AC system and how that works. Okay, so that's all the tests with the ignition on. Then we're going to be doing the test with the engine running. Now that's going to be quite simple. Basically, we're just going to start it up. So we're making sure that when you turn the key, because there's a plug and play, it should be when you put the key in and you turn it and go to crank it, it should start over. So you're making sure that that's working. We're going to make sure that we've got some tacho signal coming through there, or rev counter signal. So we're going to make sure that that's working. And then obviously we want to make sure that the coolant temp is working. So remember, the coolant temp for the dash is being taken from the single wire sensor in this particular case, which would be on the other side of the engine, and not the 2-wire one. That's what the ECU uses for its own coolant temperature. So we want to make sure that that is working as we expect it to. Also, while I'm here, down in the video description, I'll have a link to the video that I've done on how to adjust the coolant temperature on our little devices over here. I try and set it up as best I can, but obviously when you get it in your vehicle, you can fine tune it to your exact specification. Okay, right, so let's jump into it. So let's go turn that key on and get the ignition on and start doing the test. So again, nice and simple, standard car. We're just going to turn the ignition on. You can hear the fuel pump whirring away there. And let's move over to our ambient temperature, and you'll see there we have got 18 degrees. Let me lift that up slightly. There you go, we've got 18 degrees. So remember, with our analog MPX devices, that just displays a constant 18 degrees. It's not going to change. It's mainly to get rid of the little annoying E. If you remove the standard ECU, you get an error or 2 dashes basically. So it's just to remove that system in its entirety. Then we're going to come over to this side, and you can see we've got our check engine light in the top right there and our oil light in the bottom left. Now, the alternator light does work, but it's based on voltage. So our little device over there is reading the voltage constantly. When it drops below a certain value, which I think is below like 11 volts, it'll then activate the alternator light. Okay. So that is how that works. I can get it to do it when I crank the motor over. So I'll hold the camera, see if we can see it. It doesn't always do it, but I always make sure that I get it to do it in the testing phases, which I do before. Right, so that is that. Now let's go over to the reverse switch. So I'm going to replicate what your gearbox does, and I'm effectively just going to bridge these two wires together. It is a switch, and it's in the name. So 3, 2, 1. And you can see we get the beep over there, so that's absolutely fine. So whatever reverse switch that's plugged into, as long as it activates, the reverse lights will come on, everything will work in your particular vehicle. Moving along, we're going to do the speed. So as you can see here, our vehicle speed currently is showing as 0. We're going to do exactly what we do all the other tests there. I'm just going to put this into test mode, so it'll output a signal that we can use to test the speed sensor. Okay, so let me just do that quickly. Right, so I am in test mode at the moment. And obviously this is a nice test as well, because it's a Hall effect style sensor. We've got 12 volts, pin 1, ground pin 2, and then obviously signal is going to pin 3. So all I'm going to do now is touch that over there, and you'll see our vehicle speed shoots up over there. Take it away, goes away, there, goes away. Okay. Still requires calibration on the particular vehicle, and that's all done inside the ECUMaster ECU, but again, not a major issue there. So you should be able to get speed depending on your gearbox. So remember guys, for the cluster, it's using the ABS ECU to get the speed. So that's going to be accurate, and that's going to be based on actual wheel speed. This would be a speed coming from the gearbox. So in this case, the R154. But if you say running a BMW gearbox, slightly more difficult because you don't have a speed sensor on that to feed into that. But we do put that in these harnesses so you guys can have a speed signal to the ECU. Okay. So that's that. Let's go over to the fuel pump now. So all I'm basically going to do is we're going to go over to tools. Let me see if you can make sure you can see that. We're going to go test outputs. Now, because it is a fuel pump, I'm going to tell it to turn on for a long time rather than just quickly. And as I hit test, there you go. I'm sure you can hear that loud and clear. So that is the fuel pump working exactly as we expect it to. Obviously, the ECU is controlling it, so we can determine how long it primes for when you first turn the key on, etc. That's all controlled by the ECU. And if you watch my other videos, I take you through how to set all that up and how to change that. Right, so let's move over to the AC system now. So what I'm going to first of all do is I'm just going to explain to you guys how I get it to work. As the saying goes, there's many ways to skin a cat. Not every single way is the best way, but this is the way that I do it. So feel free to adapt in your particular case if that is what you so desire. So basically, what I've done here on the AC side is I've set up a parametric output. In other words, an output that I can dictate exactly when and where it comes on. So on the IS200, 300s, they have an AC pressure switch, which is at the front there. It's actually it's 4 wires going into that switch because the other one controls the fans and the other one is for the pressure. So that switch grounds out when the pressure is okay. So not too low, not too high. So what I've basically done is that is now going to switch to, okay? Switch on the ECUmaster Black is effectively just needs to go to ground, okay? And that's exactly how the system works, so that's great. Now, switch number 1, that is connected to our little MPX analog device. And when you press the AC button inside the car, it's an MPX signal that gets sent to the ECU to activate the aircon. So we're intercepting that, and we've got an output on a little box, which then activates AC by giving out a ground. So in this case with the aftermarket ECUs, what I'm doing is basically this one, switch 1, which is effectively AC request. Okay, you've pressed the button in the car. Switch 2 is the pressure switch to make sure that everything is okay. Okay. And then I always try and use one of the first parametric outputs simply because I can have 3 conditions, because there's another condition I put in which is I think quite common, stand to be corrected, but yeah, I think it is quite common. So basically what I've done is I've used auxiliary 5, that's an output to activate the AC magnetic clutch relay, which is that one over there, which provides 12 volts to the AC clutch, and we're going to test that in a second. But what my conditions are currently is that switch number 1 needs to be on. So, okay, so that means you've pressed the button inside the car, our thing puts out a ground, switch 1 goes from being off to on. So basically what I've said, it needs to be equal or greater than 100, because as you can see at the top here, it says 0 is off, 100 is on, okay? And then what I've done is I've said and. Now, and means that both conditions need to be met before the output will come on. So I've said and switch 2, which is the pressure one, needs to be equal or greater than 100. So in other words, on. Okay, so that switch needs to go to ground in order to turn that input on. So in other words, if you have the AC button pressed and the pressure is okay, then the output will turn on. Okay, my third one that I've put in, okay, and again I've put an and. So in other words, in this case, all 3 of these conditions need to be met before the AC magnetic clutch relay will engage. And I've put here that the TPS needs to be equal or lower than 85%. So basically this is something where I've seen before where if you're effectively putting your foot down, you don't want your AC pump to be like a drag on the system. And so effectively you will turn it off in that particular case. Now you can use TPS, you can use engine RPM, you can use whatever value you want really, the world's your oyster. So you can use a load of values to determine what that third variable might be. You might even want to just remove that variable altogether and just have these 2 original ones. That's also an option for you, and it's absolutely fine. So that's the way that I do it as standard. Again, it is open to interpretation. These 2 are kind of essential. That one you definitely need because that's your AC request, and that one is the pressure switch. So you definitely do not want to not have that as a condition, because that would mean the pump would run without pressure. And obviously I don't need to explain to you what would happen then, especially if the pressure is too high. The third one is one I just like to put in so that you don't have a drain on the engine when you are putting your foot down. Take it, leave it. You could base it on RPM if you wanted to as well. But anyway, so that's that. So that's how the AC system works. So at the moment, obviously I haven't got the AC button pressed, but let's jump up and do that now. Okay, so I'm gonna lean over. I'm actually gonna work my way around here. Just give me a second. Let's go ahead, and as I press this AC button, hopefully you can hear there. Fantastic. Okay, so on my half cut, I've obviously just taken those two pressure wires and crimped them together. So one side is a ground, one side goes to the ECU connector over there. So I'm just giving it a permanent ground to activate that particular signal. Right, so that is the AC request and AC clutch is kind of combined in one. I can hear that the clutch is activating when I press the button because I've met all the conditions that are required. Okay. Right, so give me a sec, guys. I'll pop back in a minute and then we're going to do the running of the engine, which is, again, is going to be kind of short, but yeah, I'll see you in a second. Right, so we're back now with the engine running test. So we've obviously gone through the first section already. So there is only 3 sections, so it's going to be kind of short. Just a heads up, because this is a 2JZ GE VVT-i engine, I've actually put my drive-by-wire harness in. So at the moment, this is actually set up to work with the drive-by-wire. Again, as I said earlier, this can be run with drive-by-wire, without drive-by-wire. It makes no difference to it. You can run it both ways. So that's the reason why it's going to start up and run. I'm able to rev it, no problem, even though I've got a drive-by-wire throttle on there. So again, all we're basically looking for now is we're going to turn the key. That's going to tell us that the neutral start switch situation that goes on in these vehicles is bypassed and taken care of. So the moment you plug everything in on your side and you jump in and you go turn the key, the engine should fire over. Now, obviously, you've still got the alternator main power cable, which then goes over to here that you need to attach, and then the actual starter motor, 12 volts, that goes from there down to there over there. So those 2 things that you need to attach on the vehicle. I'm talking about my particular wiring side now to make sure that everything is correct. So let's pop around here, and I've moved the cluster around to face us now because we're going to be doing everything on this particular side now. So ignition's obviously already on from when we did the other test over there. So all we're basically going to do now is turn the key and the engine should start. So let's do that now. And there you go. Okay, so we can see that we've got our tacho signal working over there. I'm just going to rev it up a little bit. Groovy. Okay, so that's working as it should. You can actually see we've got some coolant temp on there already, and if you have a look over here, you can see we're on about 70 or 80 degrees Celsius. Okay, so that should be pretty accurate for you guys over there. And you can see obviously our oil light's got off and our check engine light has got off as well. So shut that down for now. Fantastic. Okay, so like I said, guys, when we first started the testing part, there's a good few hours that go to get even to the stage where I do the video. So we do test things like all the injectors, all the coils, etc. I do test all the outputs and inputs, even if they are not used. So I have a bunch of test harnesses that I can plug in, make sure that the fuel pressure, the oil pressure, the fuel temp, the oil temp, all of that stuff, even if it's not being used on this particular customer's harnesses, we do test everything to make sure that when it wants to get added on later, that everything is correct and working as it should. Okay, so again, thank you guys for watching. If you do have any questions, please feel free to comment down below. Again, I would advise you to go and have a look at the ECUMaster playlist if you want to get more information on ECUMaster in particular. I do have other ones for things like Link. I don't think I've done much on the Haltech so far. But yeah, so tons of videos in there, tons of useful information. But again, if you guys let me know on things that you do want me to cover, by all means, as soon as I have another harness in with that particular question we'll answer, then I can make a separate video for you guys to keep those a little bit shorter, rather than having like a 45-50 minute video where I explain everything if you just want one particular topic covered. But anyway, let's get this harness off and off to the customer so he can get his engine fitted and running. But again, thanks for watching, guys. See you again soon. Bye-bye.
Never break, always fight, never quit.